Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton,
And I'm Bob Scarborough.
and we are
Uh,
the FAIRtax Guys.
always have to look over and see if you've got the cube.
Yes, I do have the cube.
Created.
Actually, I brought this to North Carolina. I was going to bring it to the radio studio when we did our live show there a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago, and I left it in the hotel room, believe it or not. I mean, that's what happens when you're used to sleeping late and you have to get up early.
That's
But,
right. That's right. Yeah, we had you
oh,
before sunrise almost. Sorry.
oh, mercy. Yeah, you're used to that. I'm not. But I'll tell you what, that was a fun time coming up there to North Carolina, and
Oh
always
yeah.
enjoy being there at WTOB. And we got a bunch of good phone calls. If people have not heard that episode, which actually aired live on the radio station on October 20th,
Yep.
the stream here on our regular FAIRtax Power Radio podcast streamed last week. And so that's up there if you'd like to check the Rumble archives or the YouTube archives and see what we got. And I have a picture. I'm going to see if I can get this, make my screen share work here.
Okay. Is it
And
a picture from
ta-da! There we go. The
well,
fair
like
the fair tax.
we both look so mean.
I said the fair tax guys at Mr. Barbecue. That's yes we did, and that is a cup of cheer wine in my hand. So
That's great.
yeah, my own mouthful of barbecue in that in that saying.
Wow. I thought I'm looking at this thing and I'm going, man, was I mad about something?
Oh, I don't know, but there we go. There's photographic documentation that the FAIRtax guys were indeed at Mr. Barbecue, and we'll turn that back to our regular go.
Now
And,
back to your regularly scheduled pictures of the two of us. Uh,
yes, well, now and back to our regularly scheduled look at Congress.gov.
yes,
See what
sir.
the Congress critters are up to. They have got, they're always messing with the tax code. That's one of the reasons that we need to replace it all and replace it with a fair tax because of the shenanigans and whatnot that the Congress critters are always doing with the tax code. It is constant. If you go to Congress.gov, put the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes in the search bar at the moment and hit the go button. As of the day we're recording this, 2,085 hits on that search, and that's they're searching for the string, the words Internal Revenue Code put together. And
Right.
the first item on the up for bids on the FAIRtax Power Radio today is HR 10067. They've gotten up into 5 digits now for the HR numbers. And don't you just love it the way that some of these people, the way they name some of these bills that they're proposing is just crazy. And this one is Matt Gaetz here in Florida having a little fun with Kamala Harris. Matt Gaetz has introduced H.R. 10067, the Harris Act of 2024. And this one actually has some text in it. I got to click into the text. And it says it's a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to exclude from tax exempt status entities which provide goods or services to individuals who are not citizens or nationals of the United States. In other words, if you're a 501c3 charity or whatever, and you're providing services to illegal folks that are not here legally, then Matt Gaetz wants to deny you tax exempt status. This is another case of just pushing a political agenda through the tax code, which I don't like when either side does it. But this is cool. The short title, the Harris Act, Helping Americans by Restructuring Resources to Immigrant Services Act, HARRIS. And that's HR 10067. That goes away with a fair tax. That's
Who sits around and figures up those acronyms like that? Is there like a place they go, or is there a website somewhere that you can come? We need to come up with a catchy acronym like that.
Oh, I don't know, but I'm sure you go through these things, you find all kinds of stuff, but you find the Harris Act of 2024. If I had a Hall of Fame rather than a Hall of Shame, I would think that might make that one. That's a there's not much to say about that. Gates is tweaking her for sure. Let's move on. HR 10055. This is the Survivor Justice Tax Prevention Act from Representative Lloyd Smucker in Pennsylvania. all of these have actually got text in them fairly quickly. So now I've got to click through down there, and instead of just seeing the name with a description in it, I've got to
Right.
click into the text to see what it does. And this Survivor Justice Tax Prevention Act is to amend the Internal Revenue Code to exclude from gross income any damages other than punitive damages received on account of any sexual acts or sexual contact. So I guess if you get a judgment against somebody for that kind of harassment, if you win and get a lot of money from it, they want to exclude that from gross income. They'll make you pay income tax on the punitive damages, but any of the other kind of damages you'd get in a suit like that is not income if this bill becomes law.
Right. Right.
You're right. That's about all you can
Yeah,
say with that one.
next. No, I'm just kidding.
Next.
The whole thing is we can do away with all of this with the fair tax, especially, and there's probably going to be a way for Congress, our congressional representatives, to figure out how to continue the gravy train relationship that they have with lobbyists, which I think is significant, and that in terms of why there's a stick in the road for passage of the fair tax. They're trying to figure out how they can move their project, quote unquote, project forward,
Mm-hmm.
and keeping that money coming to them. If indeed the fair tax takes away the ability for the lobbyists to effectively fund the campaigns of our representatives.
Mm-hmm. Let's move on here. This is H.R. 10046 from Representative Greg Landsman of Ohio. This is, let's see, scroll back up here. This is the 21st Century Vehicle Choice Act. And if you scoot on down there, it says that what they're doing is they're messing with the amount of the clean vehicle credit, one of the 857,443 credits in the tax code. And I just made that number up, but it's probably not too far off. They want to increase the clean vehicle tax credit from $3,750 to $7,500. They want to increase the previously owned clean vehicle credit from $4,000 to $8,000, and change something from 30% to 60%. I don't see the context what they're talking about that. And finally, there's an increase in the alternative fuel refueling property tax credits. There are just too many doggone tax credits in the tax code. And, as you mentioned a minute ago, just about every last one of them is done at the behest of a lobbyist. And all of this insanity goes away with the fair tax. It's just crazy. All right, one more. This is another one where you got a neat little acronym, the Little, Little, the Little Act of 2024. That's HR 10041 from Representative Josh Gottheimer, if I'm reading that properly, from New Jersey. And click into the text here. And this one says that this is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish the Child Care Provider Startup Credit to increase the amount of and make refundable the expenses for household and dependent care credit and for other purposes. Credit, deduction, exemption. You will find those just all through the federal tax code. And the thing is, when somebody gets a deduction or a break, that means somebody else is having to make up the difference. It's not fair. The whole thing needs to go away, and we can throw it out and replace it all with a fair tax.
I agree, and I think that I'm looking up something for our next segment, but I got to thinking about this the other day. There's with all that's going on in politics, everything has a political angle to it now, and
it does.
It's one thing that the fair tax does not have is a political bent, conservative, liberal, not in the middle, moderate, whether you're a libertarian or Republican, Democrat, whatever your party is. This is simply a way to collect the same amount of revenue that the income tax provides to the Treasury. And because that's part of what it has to do. It has to be able to generate the same amount of revenue. And I would think that everybody would want this simply because they would have more control over their, their tax bill to the
Hmm.
federal government, simply by the fact that they would be paying at the cash register when they bought something, as opposed to having having the money come out of your income.
Yeah, well, the fair tax is portrayed incorrectly as a Republican plot, a Republican idea. The fair tax is probably one of, if not the only piece of legislation ever in the history of our great republic to have originated by the private sector rather than the Congress critters. The fair tax was researched, the fair tax was put together, the fair tax was developed by an
Yeah,
independent team of economists that were, from both sides of the aisle. They were just trying to come up with the best economic system they can for collecting the same amount of money that the income tax does. There was no political agenda, and it has somehow morphed into a Republican idea. At least it's presented that way. And of course, but when the fair tax first came out, it did have bipartisan support, more from the Republican side than the Democrat side. But then the Democrat leadership decided, wait a minute, we don't want this. And anybody in our caucus that begins to support this is not going to get any help getting reelected, and you're not going to get any committee assignments. And so the leadership of the Democrat Party turned against the fair tax for whatever reason. But you do not have to be a Republican. You do not have to be a conservative. You do not have to be a libertarian to enjoy more money in your paycheck, to like
yeah,
the idea of not having to share your personal financial information with the government in the tax return. And people of all political persuasions, I would believe, would like to get a tax refund every month. And I would like to do something I forgot to do earlier, and that is crack open my can of cheerwine and
we were missing something there for sure.
go to work on it. Okay, that's it. That's just it. The fair tax is not. It was not partisan in nature when it was originated. Like
Right.
everything else that happens in Washington, it has become, a partisan football, especially since. Wait a minute. There we go. Especially since that the Speaker of the House that was deposed earlier promised a vote on the fair tax in the House of Representatives, which has yet to happen. And it looks like with very little time left in this 118th Congress that it's going to happen. So hopefully we can make them honor that promise next time Congress convenes in the next Congress that'll start in January.
Well,
We'll
that
get
would,
at it.
I mean, the promise was made by a man, a one individual. It wasn't necessarily something that could be transferred over to the next Speaker of the House.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, oh yeah. There was really no 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 rule or no law that said they had to follow through on his promise. I got a newsflash for you. Politicians make promises all the time that they don't keep, believe it or
yeah,
not. And apparently that was one of them. But hopefully there's still enough support for the fair tax within the Freedom Caucus, which is the group that forced Speaker McCarthy to make that concession. And of course, it's people on both sides of the aisle there in Congress. They're all addicted to lobbyist cash. They're all addicted to the money that they can get manipulating the tax code. So it's going to be really tough to get this through. But I think it's doable. We're going to keep at it here on Fair Tax Power Radio, encouraging people to write their Congress representatives and just say, what do you like about the IRS so much? Why are you not supporting this bill that will get rid of it? It's been up there for close to 25 years now, and nothing's happened. It's about time that you all started making some action on this.
yes, without a doubt. And everybody points to. I mean, can you imagine if you had enough horsepower to get the word out to enough people? And I think we've had some pretty good traction this year with the exposure that Steve Hayes had when he was in front of Congress earlier in the year. That we've had Representative Linder on our show here, the first person to introduce HR 25 in the House of Representatives back in 1999, and the proliferation of commentary about all of the tax cuts and things that are, everybody's always talking about taxes, and the fact that we have a spending issues. We have inflation that's persistent with us. Folks are going to be looking for a a true method, not just cutting taxes necessarily, but changing the whole method of operation with regard to gathering income for the federal government. And it does
Hmm.
not have to come through the income tax. There are
Yeah.
several different ways for that to happen.
Yeah.
Personally,
Talk about changing the way it's going to be done. There
yeah,
have been actually there has taxes have been more of an issue or a more visible issue in this election cycle, and this episode is actually running on election night. So
right.
we're recording it a couple of days ahead of time, so obviously the election counting process is still going on. We're not even if we were on live, we would not have a winner here at about a little after 8:15 on election night. But
Right.
it was interesting that taxes have been more visible in this campaign than they have been in past campaigns, largely because of some things that Donald Trump has said, and I don't know how serious he is about them. I think he's quite serious about the idea of no taxes on Social Security benefits, no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime. That you can do. But his other plan that has been put forward is one, of course, it would have to get through Congress for actually become law. But this has drawn a lot of attention by fair tax people thinking, oh, wait a minute, Trump at least has got the idea in his head that replacing the income tax might be a good idea. He was proposed replacing the income tax with tariffs, which seemed to be one of his favorite words. But
Right.
think, go ahead.
I was going to say the different people have weighed in. The tax experts have weighed in, and the commentary regarding tariffs replacing those targeted reductions or eliminations of various income tax and categories still follows what we always say about it's choosing winners and losers. It's targeting this group or that group and that kind of thing. And while it sounds good, the reality can it work? And
My
replace,
understanding, go ahead.
replacing it with tariffs, of course, we feel like it should be replaced with a consumption tax, which spreads the responsibility out to everybody, not just somebody that is reporting income, but everybody that goes to the cash register, whether they be citizens, international travelers, whether they be here in the country, undocumented, as the phrase goes, or illegal, depending on which category you want to, place on folks coming across the border. Could be cash economy and drug dealing and so on, and houses of ill repute and all that. Would all be paying taxes. Evasion would drop precipitously, and with the option of tariffs does not allow that doesn't happen, because you're still creating an income
Hmm.
that bypasses what HR 25 stands for, which is a tax on consumption, eliminating the Internal Revenue Service and the income tax and the 16th Amendment to bring us to a more fair and simple way of collecting revenue for the Treasury.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, tariffs, historically anyway, have not really been the primary purpose of tariffs has not so much been to raise revenue, which is what we need to do to replace the income tax system. They've always been a tool in conducting trade. If China, for example, was dumping steel here in the United States, selling it way cheaper than the American steel companies could do, and probably even sell it at a loss, with the idea of putting the American steel industry out of business, that the Chinese would dump steel into the U.S. market. And when the government saw that, oh, that was what's happening, they say, all right, we're going to slap a tariff on steel, which is a specific tax on that product. The purpose again was not so much to raise revenue, that's a side effect of it, But the purpose of that is to protect the American steel industry from being undercut unfairly. And when you think about it, a tariff is, you could think about it as a corporate tax that is levied against a foreign corporation as opposed to an American corporation. And it really doesn't matter what it is. The result is the same. A tariff or a corporate income tax both raise the price of goods. The tariff raises the price of goods specifically because that tariff is applied to that particular good, be it a car, be it a roll of steel, be it an airplane, whatever. But the
Right.
corporate taxes are just an increase in the cost of doing business. And whether it's a tariff against a foreign corporation or a corporate tax against an American corporation, the idea is the same. The consumer is going to pay that tax, not the corporation, which is why I don't think tariffs is really a good idea. I mean, Donald Trump is a smart guy. I'll give him that. And he has used tariffs when he was president to raise a good bit of money, and also, kind of for the way the tariffs were meant to be used in the first place to enhance the competitive position of American industry versus foreign industry. But whether the entire income tax system, which raises almost $2 trillion, could be replaced with tariffs, I'm not sure that that's even doable. But it's not a good idea, simply because what you're doing when you're imposing tariffs is raising the price of everything that tariff is applied to, and the consumer is the one that's going to pay that, and that ain't right.
And that's true. And reports are proliferating through media, about low and middle income earners would basically get stuck with a higher proportion of the cost of these of the tariffs. And we have experts that are saying tariffs are at best a flat tax and more likely a regressive one. And what we talk about with the fair tax on consumption, that the prebate basically untaxes everybody up to the poverty level and creates less of a burden, reduces the burden on low and middle income earners. And then all of a sudden you have everybody gets the prebate based on family size.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to use that money that comes in the form of a check or direct deposit into your bank account as the prebate, which is refunding in advance taxes that you would pay through the next cycle, which in the case of the prebate is every 30 days. And you get to use that money on what you consider to be essential needs of your family.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's but the thing also that really isn't heard mentioned much in the Trump's tariff idea is that tariffs can start trade wars. I mean, for example, if the U.S. is going to slap a tariff on Chinese steel, then what's to stop China from slapping a tariff on, American grain or whatever? So you charge me, I'm going to charge you, and prices for everything everywhere on the globe go up. So tariffs, when used, properly and in very narrow scope, can work. But to make them as a replacement for the income tax, of course, I'm not an economist, but I just don't see that working. So we need to get to Trump and need to explain to him, use your tariffs as you need to regulate trade here. But if you're looking to replace the revenue that the income tax system would make, that's what the fair tax is for, and that's what it was specifically designed for. And it will do a much better job, the fair tax will, than tariffs ever dreamed about in the replacing the revenue that the income tax system would generate.
Right, absolutely. The major provisions proposed by candidate, former President Donald Trump, a wide variety of tax and tariff proposals that I don't know if he just comes up with them out of the blue or if he's got an advisor that's talking to him. I would venture to say that he knows about the fair tax. There's no way that anybody in Washington, D.C. doesn't know
Yep.
or is familiar with the tax. I know that sometimes we always say, it's there are four letters in fair tax, FAIR, and there's also four letters in flat tax, FLAT. And sometimes the general population just sort of mixes those two together, and there's a little bit of confusion about the difference between the two, because, and here we look at what is being proposed by the candidate Trump. It could be, it continues to muddy the water of deductions that deductions float around in for the income tax. Again, different rates, brackets, personal exemptions, child tax credits, alternative minimum tax changes, and the tariffs on top of that. Again, we were just getting mired in Washingtonese about what income tax, how you monkey around with it to get it to where it actually it gets so confusing that you can't unravel it. And here we are 4 more years down the road, or 2 years, and nothing changes. But we do know that what's getting ready to happen with regard to our being in the national debt's up. We're getting ready to pay a considerable amount of our income to the federal government in interest on money that's out there that we owe to various countries rather, that we owe to various countries, and it's going to be a difficult claw back unless something drastic happens. And we feel that the tax on consumption does that, getting rid of the 16th Amendment so you can't get the income tax back, eliminating the Internal Revenue Service. And the more people realize, what we've got, the more the general public can latch onto this as the way to save it, because it makes it impossible for our government to maintain services at an appropriate level for the citizens, things that we've come to understand the federal government needs to provide.
All right. Well, we're going to have to wrap this up. We're about out of time here on this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Hopefully by this time next week, we will have a winner in the presidential contest. Sometimes it takes a while for these things to come about. We need to get back to, I'm not going to get up on that particular soapbox. But let's just say that hopefully by this time next week, we'll know who the winner is, and maybe we can get Steve Hayes back with us and get his expert opinion on where we are headed in this country taxation-wise, depending on who was the winner. But that's going to be it for this edition of FAIRtax Power Radio. Thank you so much for watching and tuning in and sharing the videos. Appreciate that. Till we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
I'm Bob Scarborough.
We are the FAIRtax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Roll Tide.
So what would you do for her?
We've got several programs that will help her. We just need to find out how much she makes. But the good news is, the less she does, the more we can help.
Yeah.
If I may, with the fair tax, we wouldn't even tax her income. So the more she makes, the more she has.
But still, a consumption tax could eat up a lot of her income.
Which is why at the beginning of every month, we're actually going to give back all that she pays in taxes on basic necessities.
You're going to give her back her taxes?
Every month. On everything taxed on basic necessities. But we're also going to give it back to you and to every American citizen.
Why?
Well,